Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
My friend John, a great man in the spirit, who has something to offer to our lives as he offered to the lives of many others. And it's only within the fellowship that we can share within the spirit of this program. I introduce to you John from Berlin, Mass.
Thank you. I used to have trouble being an Indian, too. When I used to drink in New York State, some bar rooms, if they find out that you're an Indian, they didn't like to serve you. They believed that there was once a wise man who said, "Never give an Indian a firewater, he goes crazy." And you know, that's a bad news if you're an alkie. But I woke up one morning in a Winchester hotel in Syracuse. It's a hotel where you can stay all night for $1. And I was sick, and I looked in the mirror, and I think that's where I received my first spiritual awakening. I said, "Christ, John, you don't look like an Indian." I took another look, and I said, "You look more like an Irishman." And you know, when you are an Indian and you think like an Indian and you try to drink like an Irishman, you get into a lot of trouble, and I did. I do feel very special being here. When my friend Joe was introducing me, I couldn't help but to remember how I felt when I was first invited to attend my first meeting. A man who came to see me in a mission in Syracuse, New York, was another Indian fellow that I have once met in Tupper Lake, New York. I've lived in the Skid Row for 7 years, and I used to travel slowly but steady. And one night I was in Tupper Lake, New York, and I walked into a bar room, and a fellow came to see me, and he called me by my name. I have never met him before, but he said he drank with my father. So he brought me to his home that night, and I met his wife. She was a nurse. But Ike became an alcoholic, and he lost everything, including his wife. And he wound up in the Salvation Army in Syracuse, New York. And they started to attend meetings. And about a month later, someone told him that there was another Indian fella in the mission. He's sober. So Ike walked in one night, and he says to me, "I'm going to an AA meeting. Would you like to come along?" And I said no, because I didn't know what an AA meeting was. And I have been sober for some time. But as I have learned in my recovery in AA, that I've always been an extremely sensitive person, especially when I'm sober. I get hurt easily, and I don't suffer well. And I was sitting there with long hair, and I always had trouble with wine sores. They usually take about 3 weeks before my face would clear up. And I wasn't dressed, and usually I don't like to go anywhere in this condition. But Ike says they have coffee and donuts, and they're free. So I said, "Let's go." And that's how I happened to walk into my first meeting in Central Group in Syracuse, New York. It's a group like this, where you have people from all walks of life. A man who stood at the door, who became a good friend much later in life, was a lawyer who had been sober for 13 or 14 years, a well-to-do politician, and his job every Friday night was to shake hands to everyone who walked into the central group. And one night it was me. And when he seen me with my long hair and wine sores and dirty, he rushed over and he grabbed my hand with his two hands and he says to me, "I'm so glad to see you." And I sat down, and my first speaker in AA was Lady Judge. And she was saying something that confused me. She said, "If you are new, please try to identify." Well, here I am. I'm in my late 20s. I have been away from my reservation since at the age of 14. I've spent 4 years in lumber camp in Maine washing dishes. Then I joined the Canadian Infantry when I was 18, where I spent 3 years and a half washing more damn dishes. And I take a drink, and I'm in skits for 7 years. I have never been married. I have never had a driving license, never owned a car. I couldn't read and write. And I'm in a mission supposed to pay 35 cents a night, and I'm behind 3 weeks' rent. I had some financial problems. And I'm sitting there with long hair and wine sores listening to Lady Judge says, "Please try to identify." And it isn't that I have never met a judge before. I met one particular judge 43 times. He never once asked me to try to identify. Last time we met, I thought it was very touching. He called me John. And night before, I have just accepted Christ as my personal Savior in the mission. And the fellow said I was saved. Well, one look at Judge Dorsey that morning, and I knew damn well I wasn't saved. And he has my record. He says, "John, do you know how many times you've been up here?" Now, you know, when you live the way I do, you don't keep track of everything. He says, "You've been up here 43 times. And I said, "No wonder he looked familiar." Then, you know, the poor man, you know, he died in cirrhosis of the liver. I say a prayer for him now and then. But he had my record, and then he says to me, "Do you know that the Fayette Park here in the city, that's for the decent people to go there on Sundays. It's not for bums like you." Then he says, "You know, you're Indians, you're all alike. You come to this city, you work for 1 week until you get your pay, then you go out and get drunk, and what do? You always get into a fight. That's all you want to do," he says, "is fight." Then he took his glasses off, and he gave me 6 months in Jimmyville. And I said to myself, this guy never liked Indians anyway. Because he was bald-headed. I said to myself, maybe my great-grandfather got to him first before I did. But I am, who would ever believe that if someone had told me that night when I was sitting in that meeting that if I should stay sober, a person like me would receive the call from Bill and from the committee to be asked to travel all the way from Berlin, Mass. To Little Rock, Arkansas, I would have never walked this far. Never. And I left home early this morning and I took a jet. And I arrived here and Joe met me with his friend who had a Cadillac. Now that's class. Judge Dorsey would never believe that. Then I arrived here and they put me at 7th floor, this beautiful place. But I think most important thing of all, I was never going to speak, and I didn't for a few years in AA because I was very sensitive that I never talk with English. And usually I didn't say anything when I was sober. And I've always felt very unhealthy because I never went to school. And I couldn't read and write. And I thought, well, I'll never get up and speak. But for those of us who have been fortunate enough to have a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for some time, we know that it's the program, it's the people where they help you to understand, to accept, to be able to see, and to be able to believe. And all these things, of course, has happened to me in AA. And I know that among you are professional people. I still don't have no education. I don't know any big words. Oh, I know couple, and when I speak in the big audiences, I usually use one or two big words. Because there's always one or two people who are educated beyond their intelligence. They need help too. But it's strange that it doesn't bother me anymore that I don't talk with English. Oh, I tried in the early days to try to talk better English, but some people cannot talk better English. And it doesn't bother me anymore that I don't have an education. Probably because among many things I have learned that quality in a man's life, it doesn't come because he talks good English or because he has a degree or a talent in choosing the right words and put them in its proper place. A lot of wonderful things have happened to me since I've been here. I left home when I was 14. My father, when he passed away, he had a half a gallon of jug under his bed. And 5 years later, we lost 8 members in our family. I had twin brothers who died in the same year. They all died with TB. My mother died when I was 13. And for 1 year, I lived in the reservation because I live in an old empty house. And I suppose my people must have felt that I too had TB. And in those days, people were afraid of it. So I live in this old empty house. But Indians in the reservation, they talk about lumber camps in Maine. And I felt that one day I would leave home. Because I have always dreamed of having a nice home and nice clothes and nice job and nice girl and maybe a car. I always felt that if you could have these things, then you would feel the way other people felt who had these things. Someone said, we think that somebody's grass is greener. It could very well be, but he doesn't feel any better. So I left home. I grabbed a freight, and I arrived in Patton, Maine. I asked if I could get a job in lumber camp, and I was told that I was too young. But the war taken all the younger men, and the fellow said that they need someone to wash dishes. The camp is 26 miles in the woods. It's one of those CC camps. And if you wish to take a chance, why not? And so I did. And I met a fellow by the name of Bill Langster in lumber camp. I told him about my life, and he gave me a job washing dishes where I stayed with him for 4 years. And now and then he would brought me to his home. He had 3 daughters. It was a very respectable family, a family that I suppose everybody likes to be treated with respect. I have always liked that. His family told him when I was 18 that it wasn't healthy for me to be in the woods for so long. That why don't I join the younger people? Why don't I join the army? And Bill says, who knows, John, maybe you can win a medal or 2. And that, I thought that was a good idea. I was hoping maybe I can win a medal or 2 without getting hurt. Because I'm a super sensitive person. I get hurt easily and I don't suffer well. I didn't know that if you have no education, that you couldn't go on training. Now, I didn't mind washing dishes in lumber camp. It didn't bother me. But when they gave me a job washing dishes in the Canadian Army, well, it made me feel that I wasn't as good as other younger people. And of course, I could not identify my unhealthy attitude until many 24 hours later as I recovered in the program. I reacted on that I'm just as good as the next person, and the Army gave me another test, and I couldn't pass, and so I washed dishes. Now, I didn't go home. I had plans of going home and to show my people that I have changed. But I never went home. I didn't want anybody to know what I was doing in the Army. I didn't even go out with a girl. And I was old enough to know that I should go out with a girl. I mean, you don't learn everything in school. Someone once said, God moves in mysterious ways. When I was 21 years old, I got my discharge with a friend. We went out and each bought a suit, and then he says to me, why don't you and I go to a nightclub? We'll have a few drinks and we'll meet some girls. So we went to a Pluri Cafe in Montreal, in the 3rd floor, where they had an orchestra and the girl sings. And that's where I took my first drink. I was 21 years old. And what happened to me, it's something that I have heard every time I listen to speaker in AA, that when I drank, alcohol took away all those things that bothered me when I was sober. You know, when I drank, I could talk to anybody. It really didn't bother me because this idea of I didn't talk good English seems to disappear. And it never bothered me that I washed dishes for 3 years. Of course, I never told the truth either. Can you imagine anybody drinking and telling a fellow that I washed dishes for 3 years and a half in the year? It just doesn't make sense. You certainly don't go out and a girl and said you washed dishes for 3 years and a half in Canadian. But the thing about lying when I was drinking, when I look back in my own life, it's not something that I could do easily sober. Because although I wasn't taught anything, a long time ago, I remember my mother used to say, the only thing that it is honorable in man is the truth, and there is no substitute. And if you lose the truth, then you're denying yourself from respect and from honor. Well, I was intelligent enough to know that it was true. And maybe even times in my life when I would suffer a little bit because I knew the value of the truth. But when I drank, my mind changed. Well, I went out with a girl the first night I got drunk. That's the only good thing that booze did to me. It was about time that I go out with somebody. For a while, I didn't know whether I liked girls or boys. I mean, thank God for drinking. When I drank, if you didn't like me, you had problems. And do you know how nice it feels when someone doesn't like you? You go over right in his nose and tell him, tough luck, mister. It's not by accident I've seen Judge 43 times. But how strange it is when I'm sober. If someone look at me just the wrong way, not only it bothers me, but I can't seem to take it away. So it was important to me. I don't say that I'm an alcoholic because I couldn't read and write, or because I was bashful, or because I had an unhealthy attitude about me. I'm saying that in the early days when I drank, alcohol was a friend. And if someone came to me that night and told me, John, if you continue on drinking, you will live in the Skid Row for 7 years, I would have never believed it. Never believed it. All I knew that alcohol was a friend. But now that I am an alcoholic, and I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and certainly I have, in the past 23 years, I have been taught something about the nature of my sickness. I have been given a new education. And I feel that it's very healthy for me to look back today, because when I do, I can see so much more that I have passed by in life. Now I look back in my first drink, and I can honestly say that on one hand, the booze gave me a freedom that I have never known, but on the other, it started to rob me right away, because I have never been a social drinker. Another strange thing, the sickness that blinded me the night I took my first drink was the same sickness that blinded me when I came to AA, when I arrived here with mountains of evidence. After living in the Skid Row for 7 years, I still couldn't see that I had a problem with booze. But I was an alcoholic. The night I took my first drink, I have never been a social drinker. There were times when I stopped drinking because I really meant of wanting a nice home. I've always wanted a nice home. And you know, when I left this morning, I left a 14-room house. You know, I learned to live like a white man, $1 down and $1 a week. I even have a dishwasher. I still like to press the button because it hums, and I said, hum, you cheap bastard. It's one of my... But I would go and see Major Harvey. Major Harvey is a Christian, I suppose, who loved people. His job was to help people. And I cannot say that He never tried to help me. In those 70 years, God knows, he gave me breaks. And he would send me to a doctor after 3 days, 4 days, when I can have a soup to get an examination. And you know, within a week, I'll be all dressed up. He would say, John, go downstairs and pick you a suit, whatever you want. And after a while, really know something about suits. And I get all dressed up, and I would walk in the streets. I remembered in Syracuse, in Salina Street, there was a big restaurant. And I used to stand there, and people used to arrive with a car, with a nice girl. They would walk in there and have a meal. They would dance, and then they would leave, and I'd be standing in there. I got a little pass telling me I can go back to Salvation Army at 11:30. And I said to myself, if I can be just like them, then I said to myself, it's the bums in the city that is driving me to drunk. And it's the cops, they don't like Indians. I never stopped to think about that. I tear their pants off. And I remember one time I had one of these big firecrackers, them big ones. And there was 2 cops having coffee in White Tower, and I'm sitting there drunk. Can you imagine a mind that goes? I'm lighting a fire. I'm looking at his hat. It's sitting right in front of me with a picture in it. And I said to myself, why is he going to be mad when I blow that thing up? Well, let me tell you, he was mad because he caught me outside and he had that gun right in my nose. And he said, say anything at all and I'll blow your guts off. Well, you don't think I'm going to say anything. I'm not that brave. So I walked to Utica. 47 miles. Took me 2 days to get there. I arrived over there and I went to a slave market, and an Italian fellow walked in and he said, I'm looking for someone to paint the steeple in the church. I pay $40 a day. So I said, I can paint the steeple in the church. So I got a job. Away from Syracuse, away from cops, away from bums. And I got me a 3-room apartment. And I used to paint it. And I even waxed my floors and left the door open, so I was hoping that other people could see what kind of a person living there. What the hell is used to have a clean room and nobody can see it? So here I am. Then I got me a second-hand television, because I am a lonely type of person. And a couple of weeks later, I bought one of those radios that you can read China. And I don't talk Chinese. But I'm sober. And I'm going to this little restaurant because there's a waitress there who likes me. And I was hoping maybe I go there long enough, she'll ask me for the date. But she never did, so. The thing I'm trying to say that I wanted to be a different person. And it's strange, 23 years later, what they taught me, John, be yourself. Be yourself. But I was an alcoholic then, and I was suffering from a threefold illness. And they said it's cunning, it's baffling, and it's powerful. Without help, it's too much for us. And it was for me. It was. I used to go in a bar room because I could buy somebody a drink and just someone to talk to. And one night I took a drink. And I woke up in jail in Syracuse. And half of it I only remember how I got there. And in the morning I was facing a judge, and he said something funny, and people laughed. And I always remember saying to myself, nobody understands what I've gone through in the past month. Nobody really does. Like walking in the streets till 3 or 4 hours and wishing if I could be just like him. Trying to find something in life. And it's very, very confusing. There is another fellow who tried to help me. His name was Tom. He run the mission. He told me one morning that there was a fellow by the name of Billy Graham coming to that city. He said, John, this man helps an awful lot of people. You go and listen to him. And I did. For 28 nights or something. And I was sober. Oftentimes I said, if Billy Graham stayed for a year, I would have been sober for a year. But he left and I got drunk. And a week later, Judge Darcy gave me 6 months in Jimmyville. And I said, I will never listen to Billy Graham again. The last time I wanted to stop drinking was in a mission. I went there wanting to get a bed. And a fellow get up. He said to us that he was a bum just like us for many years. Very spiritual man. And he said one night he accepted Christ as his personal Savior, and since then he got married, got himself a nice job, he bought a new station wagon, and he said, any of you bums can do the same thing. Very spiritual man. And so I'm sitting there, and of course he touched me because I have always felt that if you could have these things, you'll be all right. And he says, all you have to do is move forward and accept Christ as your personal. So I did. I said to myself, that's not hard to do. So I moved forward and I kneeled down, and I knew nothing about Christ. The 4 years in lumber camp, I used to listen to lumberjacks talking about him. And by the time they finished with him, you wouldn't believe him either. But you know, the book talks about like a drowning man who grabs a straw. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. And I kneeled down, and the fellow was sincere. Of course he was sincere. He put his arms around me, and he said, son, you're saved. And that's the morning I was facing a judge. And he gave me 6 months. And so by the time I was invited to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I have been defeated, like most alcoholics are if they drink long enough. And here I was in an AA meeting listening to a lady judge that I didn't even understand. I didn't understand. Do you know, I listened to that lady 2 years, I memorized her story, and I still didn't understand what in the hell she was talking about. She used to get up and she used to say that it's a mental obsession that precedes the first drink, and once you take a drink now it's coupled with a physical compulsion. Try that one for size. Yeah. I used to say, if I have her disease, as sure as I-class. And you know, after the meeting, I was leaving, but this man, whose job every Friday night, shake hands, he was watching me, and he stopped me, and he put his arms around me, and he says to me, I have some friends here, I want you to meet them. And what touched me in my first meeting was the people. People. They told me that they could help me. They wanted me to come back. They told me that they needed me, and it was the simple honesty. So you might say that what touched me in my first meeting, perhaps something much greater than the words could have given me about the nature of my sickness. And the first time in my life for a long time that I felt that someone cared. It's like the feeling I used to have when I went home with Bill Langster. It was that feeling of respect and feeling of understanding. I often remember my friend lawyer, the other night I was in a discussion and someone was reading a prayer of St. Francis where he said, Lord, I pray that I may understand rather than to be understood. I wonder what I would have done if he told me that, John, I'm sober 13 years, I'm a rich man, I'm well educated, and you do like what I tell you to do and you'll be all right. I would probably took off. But he put his arms around me and he said he had friends. And my fortune, where I have been fortunate, that I came back. I have very seldom missed an AA meeting in the past 23 years. I very seldom missed a meeting. For me, this is like a home away from home. In the early days, it was difficult. When I was sober 5 years, I was living in a Skid Row. I was 35 years old. I spent my first 6 months in a mission. I had a sponsor who continually suggested that I couldn't practice AA and live in a mission. My sponsor was a man that I have known for many years. He was a man that I never trust, and I didn't like him either. Because Pat was a man who would steal your shoes, sell them and buy you a drink, and say no hard feelings. And Pat and I spent a lot of time in Jimmyville together. He was a college man. That's why I never liked him. He always felt he was better than I was. But he wasn't. And he used to be a barber in jail, and I used to wash his floors. Pat died last year, went back to drinking in Skid Row. But you know, I think about him sometimes because he liked me. He used to have a sandwich in a mission. He used to say, "John, I can't eat the whole sandwich." And sometimes later in life, I have learned that Pat never eats sandwiches. And he used to bring me a sandwich because he used to tell Bill that in the end, if we find out that we try to feed him, he'll throw the sandwich away. And he used to stop the car and say, "John, consider leaving mission. If you want to be a member of AA, you have to get out of there." But I didn't want to leave, and I guess God was on his side, because the damn place burned down one night. And 3 o'clock in the morning, I went to see Pat, and I said to him, "Mission burned down." He said, "That's the grace of God." And he got me a job working in the 12-step house. They paid me $7.50 a week and a free bed. And my job was to wash and wax floors and make coffee, answer the telephone, and wash dishes. They throw me out in 12-step house. I got into the trouble. Someone called one night. These old-timers, they come to this place and they play cards every night. And some Ann called one night and she wanted help. This was middle of the night. So I told these people that there was someone who needed help. And when they find out who she was, they told me that she's been around for a long time. And all she wants to do is use people in AA. But you know, as sick as I was, I knew it was wrong. My problem, as I look back, I like what Father Martin says. A man is a rational man, and he must learn to function with intellect first. And discipline, it's wanting or willing to be able to suffer because you believe it's right. But I never knew how to live with my head. I have always lived with my feelings. I never acted on what I believe. I have always acted on what I feel and acted badly. And especially when I was right. Especially when I was right. And I was right that night, so I upset the table. And I punched one of them in his mouth. And I knocked him down right on his ass. And that was my first 12-step call. And it was not successful at all. So I'm walking down the Fayette Street, sober, 1.5 years, no room, no job, and felt very bad because I didn't thought you could throw out a member of Alcoholics Anonymous out the street. I've learned later in life you can. So Pat picked me up. And next morning, he brought me to Major Arby. And I got a job on a truck for $1 a week. I stayed there for a year and a half. Then I started to hitchhike. One time I was in Buffalo in the slave market, and I got a job unloading strawberries and rich ice cream. When I was sober 5 years, I arrived in Marlborough, Mass. 1 o'clock in the morning. I was 35 years old, almost. I didn't even know it was Marlborough, Mass. I had no money, and I went in the men's room in a hotel, and I stayed there. And of course, you don't sleep too well in the men's room in a hotel simply because other people think that they have a right to go in there. And but Marlborough has been a turning point in my life. A couple of weeks later, I was having a dinner in this restaurant owned by a member of AA when a waiter asked me if I knew of any contractor in town that could remodel and paint her house. I said, yes, I did. She said, who? I said, me. She said, I didn't thought you were a contractor. I said, I didn't either. And she said, would you like to come over and give me an estimate? I did. I gave her an estimate of $300, and I got a job. I went back to see Paul, who owned the restaurant, and I said to him, I have a job, but I don't have any money to start. He says, why don't you go back and ask Rita? She might give you enough money to start. So I went back, and she gave me $100. So I went out, and I bought some paint, and I bought white coveralls. Because I figured if you're going to be a president in your own company, you might as well have a white coverall. And I bought some paint, and I carried everything to the job. Then I met a man in AA who worked in the telephone company, and I needed a 60-foot ladder because this house not only was big, but it was in the ledge. And so I borrowed a 60-foot ladder when we got it up there, and you know I couldn't reach the peak. So I got some old lumber under the porch, and I carried it up there. And I built a scaffold right on top of the 60-foot ladder. And that's where I started my business, right close to heaven. And you know, for change, everybody was looking up at me. And I was looking down at them. And thank God for Paul, who owned the restaurant, I didn't starve. I met a plumber in AA. Said, John, I have a ranch house in Sudbury, Mass. All you need is a 10-foot step ladder. So I borrowed a 10-foot step ladder, and I got all my paint together and my drop cloths. And I stood in the corner, and I stopped the bus. This guy stopped. He looks at me, and he looks at my ladder. He says, you're not serious. And I said, I am. I'm self-employed. And I have no other means of getting to work. I swear this guy must have been an Alfie. He says, if I give you a ride, would you promise you'll never do it again? My next house was the school teacher. She taught school 40 years and retired. She told me that. I said to her one night, you think you could teach me how to read and write? She said, I have taught thousands of people how to read and write. So after work, I went to see her every night, 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours sometimes, till 12 o'clock. And she helped me to memorize 69 questions in about 3 months. And I took the test, and I passed. And here I was in my 50-year sobriety. I was president in my own company, and I had a driving license. And sometimes later, Paul, who owned a restaurant, came to see me, and he said, "John, you can buy this station wagon, 11 passengers, for $750. I said, "I don't have $750. He said, "Why don't you go upstairs and ask the lady? She might give you enough money for the down payment." So here I go again, and the lady gave me enough money for the down payment, and here I was. I had a driving license, I was president in my own company, and I had a car. Then I said to myself, maybe I should find me a girlfriend. But I had this 4 teeth in front missing, and that's the only thing I've lost in my drinking. I like to tell you how I lost my teeth if you're interested. I'll tell you anyway. I'll tell you anyway, since it's the only thing I've lost. In Syracuse, New York, there is a place called Slave Market. Slave Market is where I live, because they give you a job, and you can get paid the same day, and you can get a quart of wine in the same day. Because I couldn't work 2 days, I was too weak. One day I got a job unloading a boxcar, all bricks. And I worked there 3 or 4 days, and Saturday afternoon I finished unloading a boxcar, and they paid me, and I started to drink. Also in Syracuse, New York, there is a bar room they call Smitty's. Smitty's where all the New York Indians drink. I don't drink in Smitty's because I'm a Micmac Indian. And Micmac Indians and New York Indians don't communicate too well. Every once in a while, 20 of us Micmacs would get drunk and we'd go to Smitty's. And we would communicate. But you know, I'm on a drunk, and I got long leather gloves that I wear unloading a boxcar. And I had no intentions of going into Smitty's. I'm walking by there, and as I was walking by, somebody opened the door and threw this guy out. And that's where I met Smiley. Smiley is a little Irishman with a degree. He weighs about 109 pounds, soaking wet. So I pick him up, and I said to him, "What in the hell's wrong with you?" He said, "It's those Indians inside." I said, "They can't do that to you." Smiley said, "No, they can't." I said to him, "What do you say you and I go in there and clean them up?" Smiley said, "It's a good idea." Well, by the Jesus, it wasn't a good idea. Because I woke up in a general hospital. I lost 4 teeth, and Smiley sitting there without a scratch. You know, I should have got rid of him then, but the years went by, and you know, every time I wake up in jail, Smiley will be there. And one day it dawned on me, he never had a scratch. So I said to Smiley, "How come that I can get so messed up, but you're sitting there without a scratch?" And Smiley gave me one of the most sincere looks. That's why it's such a good bunk. He gave me that look, and he said, "John, don't you know," he said, "I'm a college man." So here I am. I got these 4 teeth in front missing, and I told you I'm a super sensitive person. But I met a dentist in AA, and I watched him for about three weeks, because I never liked dentists. They hurt you, you know, and I never liked anyone hurting me. I never liked pain. That's why I lived with it for years. But this guy had a light air, a good smile, but that's all he had. But I cornered him, and I said to him one night, "I wonder if you could help me. I have a little problem." He says, "What kind of a problem?" Well, I said, "I'm looking for a girlfriend." but I have these 4 teeth in front missing. Could you put them back? He gave me his card. He said, call my secretary. I did. I went to see him one day, and I sat down in his chair. He looked at my mouth. He said, we have to pull 14 teeth. I said, you must be kidding. All I want is 4. He says, I can't give you teeth unless you pull 4 and fill the rest of them. I said to myself, you don't call this a bargain, by Jesus. I said to him, how long would you take to do that? He said, if you keep all your appointments, about 3 months. I said, okay. Well, I haven't never had a girlfriend for 35 years, and I guess I can wait for 3 more months. They say you get what you need and not what you want. So I waited, but I was happy. I went there one day, and he gave me this teeth I had, and I rushed home. I went upstairs, I looked in the mirror, and I laughed for 2 hours. This is one of my friend's benefits. I was at the meeting one night, and I met this lady. He said, John, I'm told that you have a new car. I said, yes, 11 passengers. And she said, I run a home of alcoholic women. I have 9 girls, and I'm looking for someone to bring these girls to a meeting. Would you like the job? I said, I'll be very happy to. So Thursday night, I picked the girls up. That's where I met my wife. We picked the girls up, and we bring them to a meeting. And on our way back, I asked her for a date. She said no. And I was very hurt. But AA was working for me, because on my way home, I said to myself, who in the hell she thinks she is? Here she is. She's got nothing. And here I am, I'm president in my own company. I own my own car, new set of teeth. Who the hell needs her anyway? And so Thursday night came along, and I picked the girls up again, and on our way back, I said to her, how about a show in Boston Sunday? She said, okay. So we went to the show in Boston, and on our way back, I asked her to marry me. She said, but I don't know you. And I said, it's all right. We have 5 miles to go. We'll get acquainted. So we got married. A lot of people didn't like that. We didn't know where to go. My wife's family, I don't know how you describe them. I wish if I knew some big words. Wouldn't sound so bad. But they used to wear long, round hats with a lot of feathers. And they never liked Gassy being an alcoholic. And when they find out that she married an Indian without feathers, I'm telling you, they didn't like that either. So we stopped our station wagon and we count our change. We had $85. And we decided we go back to my home. I have been away for 21 years. But it was, you really don't know. It takes a long time to know how to live your life, really. I was in no condition going back home. My childhood has been something that, it took a long time, and God knows a lot of friends. After my father died, we were poor. My mother used to write notes to an Indian agent, and she would wrap them around in my hands, and I would walk 14 miles and walked back 14 miles looking for food. And you know, I had twin boys who used to cry all night because they were hungry. They went blind. My mother used to say, "Don't cry, tomorrow we'll send John to an Indian agent, we'll get food." But you know, when I was 13 years old, they're all gone, and I was sleeping with my mother. And I said to her, "You think that I'll die too?" And she said, "No." She said, "You know," he said, you're different. And you're very strong. And I'm very proud of you because you never cry." And my mother never knew that I cried. And I'm not sorry. She says to me, "My body is sore because I have been in bed for a long time. Would you want to bring a note to an Indian agent tomorrow? It's the last time." She said, "I want a jar of Vaseline." And it was in the wintertime. Someone once said, you forgive, but you never forget. I arrived there, and it was snowing, and I gave this note to an Indian agent. He looked at it, he threw it on the snow, and shut the door in my face. And, you know, I used to sit in an AA meeting, and people talk about our maintaining steps. It says, "I'm going to give you an example of a man who was just like us at one time," meaning he was just like me. He went through the same emotional wringer, AA identified as such. But he wrote a prayer. And the prayer was, "Lord, let me be the instrument of thy will. For where there is hate, I will bring love. Where there is darkness, I will bring light. Where there is sadness, I will bring joy. Where there is doubt, I will bring faith." Then he says, "Lord, I pray that I may understand rather than to be understood." And I used to sit there saying to myself, that's an awful lot to ask a man. You mean to tell me that I should try to understand? Well, I said, if you want to believe in God. Then the second part he says, "Lord, I pray that I may love rather than to be loved." Then I used to say to myself, you mean to tell me that I have to love? He says, yes, if you believe in me, you have to love. It takes years, but most of all, it's not the years. It's people who understand this program, people who care about you, and people who can talk to you before you can realize that you do a lot of things in life because you believe in God, and God asks an awful lot from a man. But I was not ready, nor was I prepared to face my past, because I never knew how to act on what I believe in. I have always acted on what I feel. Kathy and I took off. We arrived back to Marlborough. We had $35 left, and we moved into a 3-room apartment that cost us to pay $13 a week. And the only thing that Kathy and I had when we moved in there was a coffee table that was given to us from a faith house. And even newlyweds cannot sleep in coffee tables. So we slept on the floor. But you can have a lot of fun on the floor too. I don't want to. I don't want to. You know, I spoke one time in Westchester County in New York. Even Alkies are rich over there. You never see so many women with jewelry. And I mentioned the fact that you can have a lot of fun on the floor. And after the meeting, this lady came to me and she said, "Young man," she calls me young man. She said, "I don't know how much fun you can have on the floor." She said, but I know you can have a lot of fun on the Oriental rug. I said to her, at least you identify. So while we're laying on the floor, I said to my wife, Kathy, you know, I would like to have a boy because I'm the only one left in the family. And I said to her, if you give me a boy, I'll buy you a diamond. And here I am, I'm too poor to pay for the bed. But I'm promising a diamond, and the beautiful thing about Kathy and I, she was sick enough, so she believed me. And at Christmas time, she was in a hospital waiting for a boy. And I walked into a bank, first time in my life, I wanted $200. And first time in my life I was told that I need collateral. And that's the only thing I never learned in AA. Nobody talked about collateral, and I didn't know what in the hell it was. I didn't want to tell the guy, what is it? But I find out after 3 banks. So I went to see my friend Paul, and I said, you know, they wouldn't give me any money in this town because I don't have collateral. He said, John, what do you want to do is pray. I said, Christ, Paul, they don't need God, they need collateral. So I went to Hudson. I met a man who was retiring that year, and I told him the truth. Well, he says, we don't lend money that way. He said, but I've always prided myself when I've seen an honest face. And then he says to me, how much is it that you wanted? And you know, this man sounded so good. I said, $400. He gave me a little lecture about paying my bills on time and said to this girl, just give this man the amount. And I left there with $400, and I went to Hallen Jeweler store, and I said to him, show me the best diamond that you have. And he did. And I said to him, show me the cheapest one that you have. And he said, you can buy this one for $150. I said, I'll take it. And he says, you want to charge it? Of course. And I said, of course. And so I brought a diamond to my wife, and I went home. And 3 o'clock in the morning, I received a call. And my wife is crying. She said, honey, it's a girl. And I said, you have to be kidding. I've already bought feathers for the boy. But she wasn't kidding. Next Christmas came along, and my wife was in there again, and I received a call, and she's still crying. She said, honey, it's a girl. But you know, they say in AA that example is a great teacher. So as I knew that my wife loved me and she wanted to give me a boy, so I went over to see her, and I said to her, don't worry about it, honey. Just have an open mind and we'll try again. I've learned that in the program. So next Christmas came along. My wife was in there again. I received a call, and she's still crying. Now this time it's twin boys. So I got scared. So I rushed over to the hospital, and I said to my wife, what you say that next Christmas we hang our stockings and wait for Santa Claus? So we did all right for a couple of years, and the girl came along. A couple of years later, the boy came along. And so you might say that this is the story in my life. As far as my painting, I went to remodeling. A few years ago, I was hired by the government to be a director in 3 reservations in the state of Maine. They came over to my house and with a big truck and 3 guys to pack. 3 guys to pack. That's a long ways from that $13 a night with coffee table. They moved us to Maine, in Calais, Maine. I arrived over there, I took my coveralls and I hanged them up. I went out and I bought a suit, shoes to match, tie, and I combed my hair. Here I am from a painter, now I'm an executive. I walk into my office, I had a wall-to-wall carpet. I had a secretary, she built like a brick house. And I had a phone with lights. I didn't know which one to push. The next office was Mr. Collins, who is a psychiatrist. The other office, a psychologist, and upstairs was an Indian education. So here I am. Can you imagine if someone had told me when I walked in here with long hair and wine sores, dirty, couldn't read and write, that if I should stay sober and be willing to be teachable, that one day I would have a contract for 9 years, a director from reservation that I used to bum, not the same one. While I was there, I received a call from University of Maine. They have an adult education program. They wanted an Indian speaker, and they paid $50 an hour. Am I interested? I said I was. So I went over there and I spoke for 1 hour, and I was so impressed with what I said, I gave them half an hour free. While I was over there, I received a call from Steve Shaw in Channel 5. He said, "You got news for us?" I said, "I have plenty of news." So he came over, took the pictures in reservation where I was working. Then he interviewed me for 45 minutes in my office. They bring all this equipment in there, you know, with big signs, Channel 4. And I'm sitting there in my desk being interviewed, and I look out and there's psychologists and psychiatrists listening what I'm saying. That's a very weird experience, you know. So 2 weeks later, I received a call from Steve. He says, "You know that interview we had?" I said, "Yes." He said, "There's no sound." He said, "Could I come over to your place and interview you?" I said, "Sure." So he came over to my house in the backyard and interviewed me for another 45 minutes. And they showed in Boston for 3 nights. People liked it. They made it special, and Steve and I won Award of the Year. And to celebrate it, there is a girl by the name of Sonia Hamlin who has a 1-hour talk show. And she calls me one day and she says, "Steve says that you should be here because we're going to talk about your special such a time. If we pay your expenses, would you come?" I said I would. So I arrived in Logan Airport, and this guy picked me up, a big car that has about 9 seats. Can you imagine? One person brings a car that has 9 seats. I never felt so important in all my life. I didn't know where to sit down. And I got in there and I said to him, "Would you like to go around the Dover Street?" Dover Street is a skid row. He looks back and he said, "What for?" I said, "You'll never understand." Who would ever believe when I walk into AA that these things could happen to me? Who would ever believe when I walk into Alcoholics Anonymous with long hair, dirty, wine sores, couldn't read and write, never been married, never had a driving license, never had a home, that if I could stop drinking and if I could be teachable, that one day I would have such a responsible job. On the other hand, I suppose, if you see me laying in the sidewalk with long hair, dirty, wine sores, you would never stop and say, now there lies a perfectionist. And I love this life. Christ, I even pay taxes. And you know it's not easy, especially when you know that this country was ours before it was yours. I think in closing, I think God is really something special. But so it's the people in AA. Because I suppose this is the only place where a person like me could come who doesn't talk good English, no education, and yet I look out and I know who you are. In my own eyes I see many strange faces, but in my own heart I know I belong here. You know, I have never had that for many years in my life. I never felt belong. It's very special for me that I have friends. I have one friend who has just passed away. His name was Gibby. He was an English professor, professional wrestler, and a millionaire. I have learned much from him. Even in his last days when he couldn't walk, Gibby was a brain. He liked people like Robert Frost. Well, I like Robert Frost too. I have never met him. The only thing is Robert Frost, I cannot understand Robert Frost. The only thing I can understand when he said a little prayer, he said, "Dear God, forgive me for all the little tricks I played on you, and I'll forgive you for a big one you played on me." Now, I can identify with that. But Gibby would stay up. His wife would say 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and would study Robert Frost because the next day I was coming there. And Gibby would act it like he was an actor, and he would raise his voice, and he would hit the table. And you know, it is so beautiful when you can understand. And Gibby, like the school teacher, I never forget her when I got my driving license. She was holding my 2 hands at the door because I went over there and thanked her. She said, "John, you must continue on your education because you have an excellent mind." And you know, she couldn't convince me, and she had tears in her eyes because, you know, I couldn't believe simply because it says, in order to believe, you have to let go. I couldn't believe because I've been in skits for 7 years. I couldn't believe not too long ago I was sleeping in the men's room. I couldn't believe because I had no education. I couldn't believe because I. And when a person says I, you can't believe. Which meant that I needed to come back. Now I understand when it talks about the second step where he says, the key that opens the door into this way of life is willingness to believe. Because faith is the spirit of independence. Faith is the courage of a man's conviction. Faith, it is that something that allows you to exercise
one of the greatest things that God gave us, right to choose for your own life. Something that I have never had in my life simply because I just couldn't believe. Slowly but surely, as I come, people in AA have taught me how to believe. Thank you very much.